We've been talking about family relationships. How many think family is important? Almost everybody raised their hand. There's a few that didn't. Spouses, you need to elbow that person. But we think that there's an ideal picture that the Bible really lays out pretty clearly for us in terms of what family relationships look like. And we summed it up by saying family relationships work best when every member of the family is submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. That this works really out of a place of mutual submission. The husbands are submitting to wives are submitting to husbands, children are submitting to their parents, and they're all doing it out of reverence for Christ, that there's this banner of the love of Jesus over home. And I know that sometimes when we talk about family, you might be sitting there and saying, I don't have a perfect family. We say this every week through this series. Nobody's family is perfect. In fact, if you think you live in the absolutely perfect family, you are living in a dream world, because everybody's normal until you get to know them, right? And the more you get to know them, the more you realize they're not normal. But it doesn't mean that we want to lower God's standards or lower his guide for us in terms of what families really look like. And last week we talked about the secret to husbands, what wives could do in order to mutually submit to their husband's need for respect. And this morning on Valentine's Day, we're going to be talking about how husbands can mutually submit to their wife's need for love. And this is especially challenged, I think, for both because we see each other so differently. For example, all you guys, you see the world through blue glasses, right? And you're looking at your world through, it still has a tag on it. You're looking at your world through blue glasses, and you see and hear the world through your little man prism, and sometimes you say, well, my wife is asking for this, but that doesn't make sense. That's just crazy. I think I would want it this way, and so that's what I'm going to do for my wife, and it doesn't work. Now, women, you're wearing a different set of glasses that probably still has their tag still on it, and you're wearing a pink set of glasses, right? And so you see and hear your world through your women's view of things, and you're looking at this and you're like, I don't understand why he can't get this. Well, why? It's so easy and so simple, and I've laid it out absolutely so clearly, but still he doesn't understand. And that's because you're looking at your world through your pink glasses, and you see and hear your world that way. It's a lot like piloting a plane. Sometimes they tell pilots, you may think that you're flying right side up, but actually you're flying upside down. You may think you're going one way, but actually you're going the opposite way. And it's easy to get a sense of vertigo where you just lose all orientation. And so you have to trust your instrument panel. Your instrument panel is your guide. It will tell you if you're flying right side up. It will tell you the direction. It will tell you how high you're flying. And if you don't trust your instrument panel, you are going to be in big, big trouble. It's the same way in relationships. If you don't trust the Word of God and you don't trust some of these basic principles in relationship, and you just do what you think feels right, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. Now, how many of you guys and ladies have gotten yourselves in a bit of trouble because you did what felt right and you couldn't understand why it didn't work for you? Well, we're going to talk about our instrument panel and talk about just some basic principles today that husbands can use in order to love their wives. And we can't think of a better way to do that than walking through these basic principles. Last week we talked about a husband's need for respect and a wife's need for love, and I just want to revisit that one more time because I talked about these two questions last week. If you had to choose, which would you prefer? A, to be left alone and unloved in the world, or B, to feel inadequate and disrespected by everyone? How many of you would say A, you would choose to be left alone and unloved in the world? How many of you would choose B, to feel inadequate and disrespected by everyone? This isn't a trick question. No one raised their hands. 74% of men said that if they were forced to choose, they'd prefer being alone and unloved in the world. If you were in the middle of a conflict with your wife or significant other, I am more likely to be feeling A, that my wife's significant other doesn't respect me right now, or B, that my wife's significant other doesn't love me right now. About 81.5% of men chose A, that my wife doesn't respect me right now. We are wired differently. And that's why it's so important that we get this and understand our spouse is uniquely created by God and wired with a certain DNA that allows them to fulfill their unique role that God has given them. Ephesians chapter 5 says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's big shoes to fill, isn't it? You know, you're trying to love your wife as Christ loved the church and ultimately died on the cross. Verse 33 says, however, each of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. And we really have been talking about two different cycles that happen. The first one is the crazy cycle. And I think anybody that's been married any length of time can relate a little bit with the crazy cycle. There's a lack of respect, which causes the husband to react in an unloving way, that causes the wife to react in a disrespectful way, and you get in this cycle that just goes down and down and down and down. Anybody can relate with that crazy cycle that sometimes you just fall into and you're like, I can't get out of this. But there's an opposite that's true. It's that they call the energizing cycle, that the more a husband can break this cycle and love his wife in spite of maybe feeling disrespected, you'll break that cycle. And then a wife will respect her husband in a way that breaks the cycle even when she feels unloved. And all of a sudden it begins to change this cycle to be an energizing cycle. It'll be a life-giving cycle in your marriage and in your family. And so important for us to do that. So we're going to talk about just some simple principles that you guys can do to love your wives. And wives, you can even cheer if these things really relate with you, if you really want to acknowledge them. It kind of follows an acronym called COUPLE. And so the first one is C, and it's called closeness. Wives need closeness. They're going to feel loved if you try to get close to them. Song of Psalms, or Solomon says, scarcely had I passed them when I found that the one that my heart loves, I held on and I would not let go. Ephesians 5:31 says, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. You know, the reason divorce is so painful is that word for united literally means glued. That God is uniting two people, and so it's like two pieces of a duct tape that you've now put together. Have you ever tried to peel duct tape apart? It's very difficult to do without just destroying the duct tape. It's that way, that there's a closeness, there's an intimacy that happens in a relationship, and wives need to feel that sense of closeness, that sense of intimacy. And it's so important that we elevate that and that we really try to get close and not compartmentalize our life. Now, because guys, you need a little help in just spelling this out. There's not a guy in the world that says, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. I want to do it. So here's what you do. All right? You hold her hand. She's going to feel close when you hug her, when you're affectionate, without sexual intentions. That's really hard for us guys. She's going to feel close when you are alone so that you can focus on each other and laugh together. She's going to feel close when you go for a walk or jog or anything that results in togetherness. When you seek her out and you set up a date night and you eat by candlelight. How cool is that? When you go out of your way to do something for her, like run an errand. The honey-do list. Any of you guys got a honey-do list? Do that. She's going to feel close when you make it a priority to spend time with her. When you send her periodic texts throughout the day that you're just thinking about her. She's going to feel close when you're aware of her as a person with a mind and an opinions, and you let her know that you enjoy discussing things with her and getting her insights. Finally, she's going to feel close when you suggest the unexpected and you get takeout and eat on the beach, or you take a walk in the full moon, or you park on a bluff and watch the sunset together. Your wives love this sense of closeness and intimacy. Now, how many of you wives, by your applause, would love that if your husbands did that or your boyfriend did that? Yeah, so there's something about that sense of closeness. It doesn't matter that 20 years ago you said, I love you, and if it changes, I'll be happy to tell you, but I told you that so long ago. They need to hear it over and over. They want that sense of closeness. O stands for openness. Colossians 3:19, husbands, love your wives and do not become bitter towards them. You know, over time, this is my 25th Valentine's Day with my wife. This summer we celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. Can you believe it? And for anybody that's married any length of time, sometimes love is really choked out and it's death by paper cuts. It's these little offenses and little, insults and injustices and a little lack of respect and a little lack of love that over time begins to choke out love. And it's interesting that the word there that's translated bitter, don't become bitter towards them, it actually means like bitter tasting. That something you would taste and it becomes bitter in your mouth and you just kind of scrunch up your mouth and you're like, oh, I don't like the taste of that. It's interesting that Paul is saying, husbands, you need to guard your heart to make sure that your heart isn't becoming closed and that you aren't becoming embittered towards your wife, but rather that your heart is open. It's so important that we prioritize this sense of openness and we don't close down. Last week, I talked about how husbands sometimes respond by stonewalling. And if they feel disrespected, they'll just shut down and they won't communicate and they'll just start watching the game or reading the newspaper or checking their emails or going into some kind of work project. Our women love it when we remain open and we try to connect. So let me spell it out a little bit. Your wife will feel that you are open when you share your feelings, telling her about your day and your difficulties. Now, I'm a typical guy. Sometimes talking is just work. I mean, it's so hard to do, right? And coming home, sometimes we want to go in our man cave. We're like big bears. We just want to go in our man cave and we don't want to talk and we don't think about anything. Now, I want to give you a little secret and a little insight. For sometimes you women say, what are you thinking about? And you're just trying to get into our head. When we say nothing, usually it really means nothing. I mean, I know it's hard for you to believe that nothing is circulating back there, but we can just shut it off. I mean, nothing is going on. But there's something about staying open and connecting, talking about your feelings and wanting to share and wanting to connect. When I get home, sometimes I'll make dinner, and Trish and I, just as we're making dinner together, we'll just talk, and it's been a good habit to get into that's a little different than what I would normally do. You say, let's talk, and ask her about what she's feeling, ask her opinions. Your face shows that you want to talk. You have relaxed body language. You have good eye contact. Eye contact is so very important. I learned this with my daughter. You know, I could talk to my boys all day long and we could be doing something else. We could be watching TV, playing video games, doing whatever. My daughter, when she was about 2 years old, I learned that our eardrums are in her eyeballs. And so, I'm looking off in the distance and I'm talking to her and she literally just grabs my face and turns it towards her so that I would look at her. It's important to make eye contact and just relax and not wanting things, just wanting to connect. When you take her for a walk to talk and reminisce about how you met, or perhaps you talk about the kids or problems that your wife may be having with them or having in her life. When you pray together, it's such an important quality to have. When you give her your full attention, not grunting responses while you're trying to watch TV or read the newspaper or write emails. You see, here's the secret. I could have a whole conversation through my grunts. How was your day? What's going on? You want that? I could have a whole conversation. I wouldn't have to say one word. A lot of you guys can relate to that. But we need to actually use our words. Use our words good. You discuss financial concerns, possible job changes, ideas for the future. I think it's going to give such confidence to your wife to know that you're open and they know what's going on in your heart and your mind.